Good morning, church family. My name is Ervin Westphal. Probably know my wife a little bit more. She's Wendy Westphal on the worship team. And most of you have probably met my daughter by now, Elizabeth Westphal. She's the outgoing one that likes to say hi to everyone and give hugs whenever she can. I started out young in Sunday school, learning about the Bible, learning about God, who He was, and the law, the Ten Commandments, learning the rules, but never really learning what relationship was with Jesus. As I grew up, I kind of lived for myself, which is very evident when at 15, I was introduced to alcohol for the first time, and that became a crutch for me. And I got to the point where I would drink whenever I could. I didn't really care about a whole lot of other things anymore. So as I grew up and I graduated, I would find places to go to drink, and I actually worked on a job out on the road, where I could actually go to the bars with the guys I was working with. I looked older, and no one ever questioned it, and I lived that lifestyle of just drinking and working. There were points in my life where I knew it was wrong, and I would try to stop my own strength, but it had such a hold on me because I started so young that I would always end up going back to it. But God decided that He had wanted me from the beginning, and there was a particular night I remember so vividly. He gave me a dream, and in the dream, there was this epic battle between good and evil. There were demons coming after me, trying to take me away, and I heard in the background a voice saying, essentially, that it wasn't allowed because I was chosen. And I remember looking down in my hand, holding a white stone with an inscription on it. I did not know what it was at the time. And I remember one night I was trying to not drink, and I was reading in the book of Revelation, because that's where you go if you really have questions, I guess. Not knowing what Revelation really was about at the time. But I got into chapter 2, and in chapter 2, it reads, pulling it up right here. In verse 17, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone with a new name written on it, on the stone, that no one knows except the one who receives it." So I read this, and of course the dream is vivid in my head, and all of a sudden I'm just like, okay, so that means that I'm chosen, that you've actually set me apart for your glory, and here I am drinking and living my life the way I want to, and yet you've said this to me. And I don't know, it was just so much to take in. I didn't understand it, and I wrote it off. I'm like, yeah, it was just a dream. But it didn't go away. It just kept sitting there and basically living in my head, no matter where I was. Yeah, 2001 I met Wendy. It was early in spring. And I moved in with her. And, we lived not the best life. And, I was working on the road, and September 11th happened, 2001. And it shook Wendy and me to the core, because it was just such a tremendous thing. But that wasn't the end of it. That same year, my uncle was murdered. My grandmother, the spiritual leader in my life, died. I had an aunt that died, and another person I knew that was part of a murder-suicide. And it just shook me so profoundly that I'm like, I need God. So in 2002, we started going to Christian Life on a regular basis. And I remember May 5th, 2002, someone was sharing their testimony of how God had moved in his life. And at that moment in time, I felt like God was speaking directly to me through him. And that was the day that I decided that I was going to start living for God. Um, it was a big moment, but I wouldn't say fireworks went off and the marching band didn't come walking through or anything. But in my heart, I felt a change begin. Um, but at that point, I began making choices that actually honored God instead of myself. Um, got engaged to Wendy, but we were still living together. But I knew that at that point that we had to get married or separate, one or the two, and I didn't want to separate, so obviously move forward with getting married. Um, but her father confronted us about living together, and um, I agreed with him. And then he offered me a solution to the problem, which was to actually live separately, but he would provide a place for me to live. And so me and Wendy actually lived separately for the last 6 months of our engagement. And I just felt, we both feel that God honored that in our marriage by providing the whole marriage to be paid for as we were getting married. Like, we didn't have any debt, and we're still married today. It's a blessed mystery to be married, first of all. But God has been with us through it all. But when I was 25, that was actually the moment where I made that public declaration by getting water baptized that I was associating myself with God, with Jesus, in his death and resurrection. And at that moment, I began to see God move more powerfully in my life. And soon after that, I actually was I baptized in the Holy Spirit too, and I began speaking in tongues. And then that began my prayer life with God. Or the thing I really want to share with all of you is God has a plan for you, and his plan has been from the beginning. It doesn't matter where you start from, doesn't matter where you're going. His plan is perfect. So thank you. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.